Welcome to RCast, the official podcast to the RChain Cooperative. RChain is a complete, concurrent blockchain platform designed for maximum efficiency at minimal computational and environmental costs by utilizing proof of stake. Beyond our platform, our investment partner, Reflective Ventures, funds organizations that are working within our core mission statement to create a better world by enabling social coordination in robust, secure, and scalable ways. I'm Derek Barris, the Director of Content for RChain. Each week on RCast, I'll be talking with the founders of our portfolio companies, as well as co-op members, staff, and other figures in the RChain ecosystem about the most pressing issues in blockchain today. Please check out rchain.coop to learn more about the platform, our community, validator sale, and information on becoming a member. American inventor Thaddeus Cahill created a massive electronic music instrument in 1901. Dubbed the telharmonium, it was constructed from 145 tonal wheels, which created 7 octaves of sound. Controlled by a total of 2,000 switches and set on a 60-foot, 18-inch thick steel girder, this instrument weighed roughly 200 tons, which caused many a DJ trouble trying to check it in at the airport security. Costing roughly $200,000 to build, which is over $5.5 million in today's terms, Cahill actually had to transport it by train. Once he shipped this beast from his laboratory in Holyoke, Massachusetts to Midtown Manhattan for a demonstration. During the weekend of March 16, 1906, Cahill hired Edwin Hall Pierce to play the instrument to an audience over a mile away via telephone wire. Despite initial raves of success by the press and public, this Muzak template failed miserably due to the outlandish operating costs and faulty service to the 2,000 high-end subscribers paying for a music subscription service over the telephone. The music of the telharmonium was creeping into the conversations of unsuspecting telephone users, wrote composer Tom Holmes at the time. What's even more intriguing about Cahill than his instrument was his steadfast approach to business. As Holmes also wrote, Cahill was the first man to have a sense for the commercial potential of electronic music, as well as the means and persistence to fulfill his dreams. Although his muse eventually sold for scrap, he only ever constructed 3 of them. Cahill's reliance on corporate funding is crucial to the arts today, given the lack of governmental funding in America. Yet, as we have known since that time, corporations are more interested in their own profits than those of artists. Nearly 120 years later, and we still have no idea how to properly compensate musicians, which is the playing field Resonate stepped into. Ambitious in scope, this blockchain music streaming service launched with a pay-to-own model, whereupon after 9 streams of a song, you owned it. Anyone trying to impact the music industry, filled with corporate interests as it is going to be fighting an uphill battle, yet one we desperately need. To stick to the organization's community-oriented messaging, they recently decided to become open source. Here's a quote from the article that is linked on our blog. We've heard from many members of the community about switching to an open source model, and so we're very excited to completely open up the codebase, sharing all of the progress we made last year, while also looking forward to contributions from the developer community that has been so enthusiastic about Resonate since inception. Eschewing the VC equity model, Resonate, which like RChain is a cooperative, is currently pursuing creative financing models. For over a century, we've been trying to figure out how to support the electronic distribution of music. Gatekeepers have rigged the system all along, from major label executives to secondary market bots. Only as a community will we create models that are fairer to artists and fans. And fortunately, we now have the technology to do so. We only need to deploy it properly. Peter Harris is the founder of Resonate. And as with a few of the last RCasts I've been publishing, this interview was conducted about a year ago with Blind Acre, who was doing some marketing efforts for the co-op and Reflective Ventures. Listening to the audio today, it's interesting to hear where they were nearly a year ago to what has happened. And there are still some very pertinent points that Peter makes about the inception of the organization and what they're trying to do for artists and fans, which I think is a very important model moving forward. I've worked personally in the music industry since 1993 in many different capacities, including as a record producer and someone who makes at least part of their income from streaming. And it's a frustrating world for artists and for fans as well, especially when you're dealing with the secondary market, which is dominated by people who are creating a model that is completely unnecessary and yet has embedded itself deeply into the current live entertainment complex, whereupon fans can no longer just buy tickets to see the artists and have to fight it out amongst themselves. They now have to deal with paying 3, 4, 6 times as much for a ticket. And the artists don't get the money, the fans don't get the money, management, venues, none of that. It goes to people completely who have infiltrated the system and, in my mind, are working against antitrust laws when in cahoots with major ticketing services. There's a lot to fix in the music industry, and it's really challenging to think about all of those things, especially at a moment where music is so pervasive and it's in our hands, it's in our ears all the time. But we have to remember the people making that music need to be supported if they want to continue to do so. So check out resonate.is, and you can follow all of their social media channels from there. And let's turn to Peter Harris, who is first going to talk about the establishment of Resonate and why it was founded.
It was established as a co-op in 2017. The project started 2 years before that, more as a recruitment and research initiative or effort, to really make sure that there was going to be strong support in the music world and that people liked the overall concept. So there was a couple of years phase during which that was set up, and then we were officially formed as a co-op in May of 2017.
Next, he discusses the biggest hurdles in creating the organization.
I think maybe there was a little bit of resistance to blockchain in the early days, because I know that, I saw a vision of this kind of ahead of the curve, that was going to take some time for the concept to really be adopted. And now we're really starting to see a big shift happening in the music industry because people are more familiar with the technology. We still have a long way to go, but it's shifted from it being very mysterious and unknown to, okay, I have a general idea what this is. Tell me more. I'm interested. So there's been a big change there. On the money side, that's because we're a platform co-op, and that's an unusual form of startup, which is one that doesn't come with equity. And so it's not appealing to the vast majority of investors. And so I was always trying to find different ways of getting the project funded, and thought that it most likely would come from the blockchain space. There were a number of different avenues, and I'm really thrilled beyond words that it happened through Reflective and RChain, because there's so much symbiotic relationship between the organizations and our mission and purpose and vision and all that.
Here he speculates on some of the advantages he has with Resonate over other industry players.
Well, we've got a better listening model that's more efficient for artists, better payments for artists. But I think it's our nature as a cooperative that everybody is a co-owner in the platform is the significant difference. Spotify, by example, has created an enormous amount of wealth for a handful of individuals. And while some of that is starting to trickle down to artists through the selling of shares that some of the labels and like the Merlin organization and such had, it's still far from what I would consider to be an equitable distribution. And so in a way, that's our USP, is that we're a streaming service that's owned by the community.
And now he'll discuss his idea of a fractal business.
The long-term effects is how Resonate's going to integrate with other services and communities inside the RChain network of communities or family of companies. I don't know exactly what to call it, because it's really kind of a different paradigm. The closest example of comparison is I think we've seen this a little bit in the Ethereum community, where you've got certain Ethereum companies kind of collaborating. You kind of get it in the context of consensus, but I think RChain's going to take that to a whole other level. And I've been a part of some early discussions about that future and that vision. Some of that's already happening in that we are working with Life ID, which wasn't funded by Reflective, but it was funded by Pythia. And we've got an active partnership working to develop self-sovereign identity solutions. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of that in the future coming out. And I will give you a phrase that I hope spreads, which is that RChain is a fractal blockchain. And what I'm seeing is a vision of fractal business, where services and communities and organizations are able to integrate with others in very seamless ways to become mutually dependent and supportive in a way that benefits all.
As I mentioned, Resonate is a cooperative model like RChain, which he talks about now.
I'm excited that it's the world's first publicly owned blockchain. That it's really an open community where anybody can get involved, and that there's a framework for that participation that just doesn't exist anywhere else. Everything else is a closed system, and in terms of the organizations, very difficult to get in. They're not accessible. So that openness and accessibility is quite something. As equally excited about the technology itself and what it can accomplish, because it most closely matches the way we want to build our service. And I think it also matches this fractal business idea of how we are going to partner with other services to do more than we could do on our own. I think a lot of the architecture of RChain is going to support that in some really, really interesting ways. And it's something we couldn't get elsewhere.
And finally, some words on how blockchain will help to solve the payment cycle problems that many, if not all, musicians have to encounter when trying to get paid.
We're working on a blockchain catalog and licensing system that's going to be directly to our main offering, but will also exist as an independent unit. And I think that's developing some very new licensing models for digital distribution that solves a lot of core problems that the music industry suffers from. I mean, there's very few sectors that have such a horrible payments problem. I often say at conferences, show me another industry that takes 2 to 4 years to pay its suppliers.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of the music biz, is that it can take years to get paid for the usage of one's music. And so part of the goal of building this blockchain catalog is to be able to cut that down, those payment cycles down to a minimum.